Hey everyone at Salesforce in the US, thanks so much again for putting your hand up to volunteer your time by running Day Without Speech for the second year running. So my name is Weh Yeoh. I am the founder of OIC Cambodia, shooting this video from Sydney, and hopefully in about a month's time we'll have your colleagues here with Salesforce Sydney also doing the Day Without Speech challenge. I wanted to shoot this quick video to firstly thank you guys so much for what it is that you've done, to explain a little bit more about where we're coming from with OIC and some of the exciting things that we're able to do as a result of your support. My background is I'm a physiotherapist who lived, worked and travelled in Southeast Asia for about 8 years, and I studied international development as well, worked in China with a big international charity, and then ended up in Cambodia and was just really astounded that some of the basic healthcare services that exist in most countries didn't exist. And one of these areas was speech therapy. And I didn't know much about speech therapy at the time, but obviously have learned a little bit about it since then. I first came across this problem when I met this young boy who in this photo is about 11, and his name is Ling. Now Ling has cerebral palsy, which is brain damage around the time of birth. Just hold it up a little bit higher for you. And because of this problem, Ling's speech is slurred. And that means that people in his community assume that Ling is of low intelligence. They thought that Ling would never be anyone who amounted to anything. He'd never go to school, he'd never be able to get a job, he wouldn't be a participating member of society. Now, when I worked with my Cambodian colleagues, they knew that Ling had a little bit more potential, but it was hidden behind his inability to communicate. And what they told me was that Ling needed speech therapy, but they also told me that they didn't have any skills at all in this area. What we did at the time was we had one of our colleagues, this one here, Pirong, trained in very basic speech therapy, and she worked with Ling over a period of a couple of weeks to months. Now I returned to that village not long after to hear that Ling's communication is improving bit by bit. In fact, at the age of 12, Ling was going to school for the first time. Now I went back to Phnom Penh where I was living and staying at the time, and then a couple of months later I turned back to this village, and then they told me something which was just really astounding, and that was that Ling wasn't just attending, he was excelling. In fact, Ling was coming second in his class. Now, to go from somebody that has no potential to being someone who's leapfrogging all of these children that have been in the school system for 7 years, well, that taught me something really important, and that's the power of speech therapy to change a life. But from looking around the whole country, what we realized was that there were no speech therapists in Cambodia at all. No university course, no knowledge of the government about this important therapy, and no push or impetus from any international organisations, including UNICEF and WHO. Now, speech therapy is more than just helping people to talk, it's also just communication in general. Now, communication is two ways. So you've got those that can't talk clearly, like Ling, you've got some children that are non-verbal, and you've also got children that have problems with language development. And then in terms of incoming communication, think of children with autism, Down syndrome, or intellectual disability. Another half of speech therapy are those who can't swallow. So if you have muscle weakness, the food and liquid will go into the lungs instead of your stomach, you can get pneumonia and you can die. Now, the lack of speech therapy is making people die unnecessarily in Cambodia, and the numbers are actually enormous. So our best estimate is that there are over 600,000 people needing speech therapy in Cambodia. And as I mentioned, not one speech therapist at all. Now in the US, obviously a much bigger country population-wise than Cambodia, there are about 180,000 speech therapists. We know that for there to be full coverage of the country, we need over 6,000. But not only 6,000 speech therapists, we want them to be integrated into the public sector. We want the Cambodian government to join us. on this journey to creating this profession. So what do we need to do? We need to start university courses, of which there are currently none. We need to do research. We need to create the content for those courses. But also, we can't just have a course sitting there and nothing around it. We need to raise awareness for students to come in. We need to raise awareness for people to demand the service once they go out. And this project suddenly goes from just being about helping children like Ling and changing their lives to actually changing an entire country. And that's the scope of what we're trying to achieve at OIC Cambodia. Now last year, 2018, you guys raised over $1,000 US. And you might be wondering to yourself, look, that's really great that you've got big plans, but what's my donation doing? So what you've been able to achieve is to help us to start that first university course ever. That's everything from writing the content, because of course we can't just take the course from UCLA or Sydney University and plonk it in Cambodia. We need to adjust for language, for culture, and for the environment, for context. It helps us to get the government on board. It helps us to get the university on board as well. It helps us to try and source teachers. Who's going to teach this stuff? It also helps us to stimulate the demand so that we can get people to come in and be part of this course. So that $1,000 plus that you raised is a significant part of getting those pieces lined up. And just as a rough estimate, $1,000 easily gets you one staff member working towards the logistics of this university course. Well, that's great, you're saying. So, okay, we can do a lot with relatively small amounts of money in a country like Cambodia. But you're probably wondering, well, what have we done since you guys did Day Without Speech, I believe, last November? Well, I'm just really excited to share this piece of news with you, which is that earlier this year, the team in Cambodia, which is now entirely Cambodian run, were able to achieve something which we've been working on for about 6 years. And that is getting the Cambodian government on board with our program. So what we managed to do was this. The first ever agreement to start the first ever course in speech therapy in Cambodia, signed by the Ministry of Education, in fact, signed by the Minister himself. So what does this mean? It means that we now have the Ministry of Education in Cambodia on board to start the university course in partnership with OIC. It means that they have now recognised that they need to do something about it. It means that over 600,000 people who were previously unknown amongst the Cambodian government are now visible. It means that the $1,000 that you raised has helped us, a very small, very grassroots organisation in Cambodia, to change an entire government. And then hopefully to change the lives of over 600,000 people. I'm very excited to share that news with you. It's obviously an enormous step towards getting that university started, but guess what? The hard work is now just starting. Because as part of this agreement with the Ministry of Education, they've committed to funding aspects of this work, and they've obviously agreed to help us in kind with support, but we need to fundraise more. In fact, this document says we need to raise $1.4 million US over 5 years to start this university course. Now that sounds like a lot of money, but when you consider that $1.4 million can affect 600,000 lives, eventually once the university course is up and running, you guys do the math on that, it's great value for money. We want you guys to really dig deep and ask all your friends and family and colleagues to sponsor you to give up talking. I can guarantee you that you will have an experience by not talking for a day that you will never forget. It is extraordinarily difficult, having done it myself a number of times. I can also guarantee you this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be part of something that we know works. And the reason why we know it works is because OIC is one of about 5 charities in the world that is working towards its own exit. There are so few charities that are doing this, but we have said we will exit Cambodia in 2030 when we have 100 therapists that are speech therapists, that are working with the Cambodian government. So this piece of work now with the government is the first of many steps to get to that exit point. We want you to support OIC, we want you to do Day Without Speech. We think that people do need to continue supporting and fundraising, but we don't want to perpetuate ourselves as the charity, and we won't ask you past 2030. And that's because by that stage, we'll have solved the problem. We won't have addressed the symptom. And the Cambodian government will be responsible for doing the rest of it. Again, thank you so much for that excellent contribution you guys made last year. Every dollar that you raise goes so far in Cambodia. Have a great time doing Day Without Speech in 2019, and do keep in touch. Thanks so much for your support.